Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the LabCoat Agents podcast. And I am excited today because we have a unique guest, not your typical real estate broker sharing their wisdom of what they've done within real estate. Rather, we have what I would call more of a tech guy, somebody with a very interesting background who now has started a platform that can benefit your business. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Mr. Steve Wayne, the CEO of Prospect Now. Steve, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So let's dive into, before we get to where you are today, you and I were talking before the show, and I want to tell the listeners, about your background because it's fascinating, because it isn't typical of our guests. Let's start with where you started, when you got out of college, or what you were going to college for, and then let's kind of just gradually drip up to where you are today and how this relates to real estate and how you actually provide a platform for real estate agents.
Sure, Jeff. Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned to you before that, I started in mechanical engineering, right, of all things, I can calculate the bending moment on a truss for a bridge, and I've never done that again since college, right? So, but having said that, it did kind of give me a framework for a kind of a technical way of thinking. So when I actually entered the workforce, I had a strong interest in software. Building something physical is very cool, but it's also, once you build the part, right, you got to go retool and build all this if you want to make a change. And software is just magic when you actually take a step back and think about it, that you can literally make changes like, in real time and then get real-time feedback from customers. So, I went into selling MCAD software, which is basically 3D visualization software for engineers. And, so there was kind of the two tracks there, sales and the technical piece. And then, as my career evolved, I realized I kind of started going more into software, Jeff, and I started selling databases. And now they weren't, for real estate, but they were actually databases of electronic components. And we sold those to, large corporations, Caterpillar and what have you. At that point, then I was like, I want to do my own thing. So I started an internet marketing company. I ended up selling that. And then at that point, it was like the .com hangover had just kind of happened, right? And, I was looking at like, what do I do next? And that's when I went into real estate. So I actually went into commercial real estate doing investment sales. And that's really where all those things kind of came together to solve the problem for me, which was, how do I get more listings? Like that was like, wow, I realized that was everything, right, in real estate. So that's been the vision of Prospect Now from day one. And it has not changed at all. The product has changed, but that core vision, I still have PTSD, Jeff, from all those cold calls trying to get people to sell, and so I really feel passionate about helping people, get more listings and be more successful in real estate.
Awesome. And you were also telling me, and I think this is fascinating to share, which has no relevance, but it's interesting, that you actually somewhere during the evolution had conversations with Google about going to work for them. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's just funny to look back on, but yeah, I was when I was selling the MCAD software, it was right, that company evolved into at the time it was going to be a .com, marketplace for, and the company, was VC backed, and I didn't really know a whole lot about that at the time. I just knew they kept hiring and we had all this money, but I didn't know that all these companies were burning through cash. And so that company failed. And I would say for the first 3 years of my career, I learned like everything, what not to do, right? In running a business, it was just excessive spending, all this stuff. So bottom line is I kind of had like the .com hangover, right? And I remember going in and interviewing at Google and going in and seeing like the engineers on the foosball tables. And I'm like, oh, these guys are going to fail. This thing's totally not going to work. And so anyway, that's how I ended up going into real estate, because I was convinced that Google was not going to be successful. So, you call some right and others drastically wrong.
That's funny. You and us both. And I think it's fascinating to hear a little bit about your background, because most real estate agents, and I don't think that's a far-fetched to say that most real estate agents don't come up through their childhood into their college years, even their young adulthood, saying, I'm going to be in real estate, right? They just end up finding their way there from so many different paths.
Right.
And you're a great example of someone who's probably overqualified from an intelligence standpoint. If you're calculating trusses and the bend ratio for a bridge, I mean, that's right over my head right there. I'm not going to lie to you.
Well, I hope none of my professors are watching right now. They may call me up on that.
That's too funny. That's too funny. All right, so let's fast forward, and you started Prospect Now in 2000. Was it 14ish? Is that about when that was? When that happened?
It was around 2009, actually.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So tell us about the background of what this is that you created, and then how it kind of again evolved to where it is today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all started with when I was tasked with getting listings in real estate. So one of the things I found too, going back to your earlier point about different backgrounds and how people get into real estate, I actually think one of the most commonly overlooked things is that sales, which is what real estate agents do, right, is a technical process. There are steps. There is a formula. And I've noticed that a lot of the really successful salespeople, like a lot of people think it's a personality type. Oh, you got to be an extrovert or this or that. But when you look at the really successful salespeople across all disciplines, they have a technical mindset in a way, and they approach something in a very methodical way. And I've seen guys succeed in sales that are total introverts. They don't come off as being salesy at all, but they're very disciplined. And I saw some of these guys that I would describe as maybe officially not having a technical background, but approach the world from a technical perspective. And these were very successful folks in at the time in commercial real estate, which was what I was doing. And so, I was told, like, okay, hey, you're new here. Here's the call sheet, put it up on the wall. And, if you're not in the top 5, you're not going to be here. Right. So, and you got to make more than 50 calls a day and figure it out. And then I was like, okay, well, where's my database? How do I do this? Like, how do I do all these property owners get together and hang out, and where do I go to find it? And I was just really just approaching it from having no knowledge of this at all. Right. And I realized, no, they don't get together and hang out, and they don't, it's not easy to find the ones that are more likely to be selling their property. And so I spent the first 6 to 9 months of my career, Jeff, literally like trying to get a bead on my farm, right? And finding those that were going to be more likely to list. And I spent a lot of time researching data because, for example, in investment properties, and I'm sure a lot of people that do real estate know this, is that they own properties. They don't own it personally. It's usually in an LLC, a partnership, a trust, and they're hard to find. So I was building this out, and then I was realizing, man, the guys that are successful are the guys getting listings. And so those two things, the pain of putting together my farm and doing it efficiently, combined with the fact that I knew that the listing side of the business, at least for me, I'm not saying like there are buyer's agents out there that crush it, God bless them. But for me, I really saw the value in securing the exclusive listing. And so therein lies the problem, right? And, I heard this statement once: creativity or constraint breeds creativity, and constraints are, okay, how do I get more listings? Okay, how do I get to these people? How do I, the problem of that just interested me a lot. And, you know, I think you could even argue, Jeff, that there's a certain element of like laziness involved. It's like, do I really have to do all this work? Like, this is unbelievable. But I ended up building a business, you know, with 5,000 customers, which ended up being, of course, a ton more work, but super rewarding work because it's a system as opposed to, you know, just kind of spray and pray. So, you know, that was like how the whole thing started. You know, I probably left my real estate job a little bit early because the product wasn't quite ready. So I was still doing brokerage. And I remember I hired a young guy to get on the platform, which was, you know, Prospect Now, like beta version, just in Northern California. And it was really interesting. This guy's name was Billy. I said, okay, Billy, like here's the system. Do these things, make these calls, send these mailers, do this. This is the process. And then, you know, let me know. And when you get a listing, we'll split it 50-50, right? Well, what happened was he got on the product and he got a guy that was interested like within like a week. And, you know, it was funny because in a way it's like never that easy. You know what I mean? And so he goes out there and sure enough, he was all excited. Steve, I got this guy, he's ready to go. And so I said, okay, you know, well, let's see, you know, we went out and met the guy. Sure enough, never happens, right? But he signed the listing agreement in the same day. And this kid who was 21 years old at the time cashed like a $40,000 check and it ruined his career, right? Because he was like, oh, this is so easy. You know, now I think he's running a painting business. But, you know, my point is that I was like, wow, this can work, right? Because I actually put real dollars in my own pocket. So I think that was really the beginning. Once I cashed a check for myself, I was like, okay, it's go time, right? So that's what started it, really.
So what you're saying is that you were basically looking at, and there's another way to get listings versus door knocking, versus calling expireds, versus calling FSBOs, versus blowing up your sphere of influence and your friends and family. And is that kind of what you're saying? Is that like you wanted to find a different way to be able to get that listing? Is that
Absolutely,
is that safe to say?
Yeah, that's absolutely. It's almost like, you know, it's like you're in a crowded theater and everybody's trying to go in the same door. You know what I mean? And it's like, man, that looks really crowded. I don't know if I'm going to get through that door. So is there like a side door or something that I can go through that nobody knows about? And that was kind of the mentality. Now, having said that, those things you described, I think they still all have their place. It's just that as Prospect Now has evolved over the years, it started out as a commercial real estate database. And we've got all the contact info and the Jeffs behind the Jeff LLC, right? And then we got the phone numbers and then all the property data. We made all this stuff available. But then the real traction came when we got built a proper machine learning. I know it's kind of a buzzword, right? Silicon Valley buzzword, but that just means it's getting smarter every week. And we've built a methodology to identify the properties that have a higher probability. You still have to do the work, right? But I can tell you the data, when we back test this thing and look at it, there is about 2/3 of your farm that you should not be marketing to, that are not going to sell in any time soon, right? And so a lot of people say, well, you know, I'm working that farm anyway, so why don't I just hit everybody? So my answer to that is, when I got my first listing in real estate, I spent all this time building out this database in actually the South Bay area. And then my first listing ended up being in a completely different area. And my point is that expand your market and identify the properties that are more likely, and you get the best of both worlds. So, you know, that's how it's evolved.
I love it. So let's I'm gonna shift before we continue down the same rabbit hole and say, At what point along this process, and this is more of a mindset type question, at what point during the process did the light bulb moment go off on this? Was it reading a book? Was it hearing someone speak? What was it that kind of just created this this thought process for you to realize this is something that is needed in the resident? And like you said, you started in commercial, but
Right.
what point did you say the residential real estate industry needs this? And like you said, you also you're putting this out to mortgage and other insurance
Right,
and other
right.
industries as well. But what caused that?
That's a great question. I think that when there's two things. The first was just taking action and building something, albeit imperfect, right? And that first, once you have that, then you can start getting feedback, right? And so it's interesting, I think a lot of residential agents go, well, commercial's a mystery to me. And the commercial guys won't admit it, but a lot of the commercial guys go, residential's a mystery to me, right? In fact, you could argue that residential real estate in many ways is it's more evolved, right? It's more sophisticated, and it's also more regulated, right? So in the beginning, I really wasn't trying to solve that residential problem until I built a product. And then people were asking me on the residential side, there's these kind of, we call them resi-mercial guys. They'll do like a single family homes, and then they'll do a few fourplexes. And then, you know what I mean? Those guys were asking for this in residential, right? So then I realized that this is the same exact thing. If you're doing, we called it investment sales, but it's basically property sales, right? As opposed to leasing. If you're focused on the transaction, it's the same, and it's the exact same process, right? So in that sense, Jeff, honestly, we got a little bit lucky because the initial product was built for this one use case. It just so happened that it also worked for the other use case. Now we started like, today our customer base is about 50-50, maybe even a little more, maybe 60-40 residential, commercial. But I mean, I would actually say, I would have to credit my customers with helping us see that, But had I not built something and gotten it out there to get customers, then that wouldn't have happened. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Awesome. So, okay. So here we are. And well, you know what, let me backtrack to that question, because we like to always talk about, one of the principles that we like to preach, and that a lot of the successful people that we talk to, they always tend to steer back to a book that they read, or a networking group that they are a part of, because going to events and going to that sort of thing is critical for success.
Yeah.
Did you have any of those moments? Did you have anything like that, or do you have any recommendations?
It's interesting as I look back. I always knew I wanted to run my own company, and I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always knew that. So I had that, I had that luxury. In fact, my dad, I could credit my dad a lot with that, because he was a, different time, right? He was literally a 50-year career guy at Hewlett Packard. And so he, super smart guy. He's got 2 or 3 patents in his name, but he always used to tell me like, hey, you know who owns those patents, right? It's the company. Even though I invented this, right? It's the company. So he always would say, he wouldn't tell me what to do, but he kind of encouraged me in that way. And I'm really appreciative of that. So then I had that kind of that framework, Jeff. And then, I read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, sometimes the simplest things, right? And the simple idea that an asset is something that puts money in your pocket. I still remember this, right? I haven't picked up that book in 15, maybe 20 years, honestly. But that book actually did have an effect on me. And I give Robert Kiyosaki credit for that. It's, it's interesting, like that simple concept, because I was like, oh yeah, my house is an asset, right? But when I'm paying money out every month. So maybe it's that kind of changed my whole way of thinking and just further, I guess, encouraged me. And then that also led to real estate. I just love real estate. It's like, I know the stock market's been like unbelievable over the last like 2 years, right? But so is real estate. And the thing I love about real estate is that banks will make loans on it. And so at Prospect now, like one of our lead engineers here, he's a big real estate investor. He understands real estate. And, he's got like 10 investment properties. And that DNA, I think, has been, I guess, our appreciation and affinity for real estate, all kind of gels to help our customers. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Very good. Very good. And I can relate, because Rich Dad Poor Dad, I can say the exact same thing. Had a big impact.
You read that too?
Oh yeah. And it's been about 20 years since I've opened the book,
Yeah.
but I still to this day probably reference some of the things I learned in that book. And there's many others since then, of course, but yeah, that's one that never gets old.
The others, but that one, what's another really good one actually that I read, now that we're on the topic? It's an old book. It's by a guy named Robert Ringer. But he wrote a book called Winning Through Intimidation. Have you ever heard that?
I have, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I haven't read it, but I've heard it, yeah.
Okay. That one, at first the title's kind of like, well, what does that mean? Like I'm not, I don't want to win by intimidating people. Yeah. And I realized, yeah, exactly. That sounds like bullying. But I realized it's kind of a play on words. It's like winning through, despite, right? Intimidation. And it was totally right in my wheelhouse at the time in commercial real estate, because he was doing multifamily sales. I actually met his son. His son, years ago, I don't know if he's still there, but his son was at doing commercial real estate investment sales. And, his dad was kind of a legend in that way, but that's a good one too. That one had a good effect on me.
Fascinating. Awesome. Good stuff. So let's move to where we are today. You've kind of given us the background, your background, what's led you to this point. So let's tell the listener a little bit deeper dive into what Prospect Now is and how it can help a real estate agent get more listings or get them a different way than what they might be accustomed to. Because like you said, all the old-fashioned techniques, they're timeless. They'll always work.
Right.
But we're always looking for differentiation. We're always looking for new ways to innovate and compete with what's coming, which is technology, which is those companies that will remain unnamed. And so give us a deeper dive here.
Totally. So by the way, I am a big believer. So let's put it this way. I was on a panel once with a bunch of tech company entrepreneurs. This was a few years ago in Orange County. And I remember one of the guys in the panel was effectively saying, yeah, we're going to disrupt the industry and we're going to get rid of the agent, right? And it was a room full of agents, which I thought was pretty funny, actually. And they're like, and the thing is, I do not believe the agent's going away. So our philosophy, I guess our point of view, is the tech-enabled agent is going to be the one that wins. So I really believe that technology is only the friend of the agent. And these are complicated transactions. I was actually talking to a friend of mine recently, and he was saying, I was about to sell my house and I thought, okay, I'm going to look at all these alternative ways, iBuyer stuff and all this. And he's like, at the end of the day, I just ended up hiring, the traditional agent that was a hard charging superstar. Right. And this guy was in tech. And we laughed about that because I just believe that relationship, it's evolved over the years. Back in the day, they used to be a market maker, right? I know buyers. And now it's more of an advisory kind of role because the data's out there, but it's not going away. So, I guess in summary today, where, the way we do that and what we believe is that every real estate agent is their own business. So that when they make a decision about, spending $99 a month on Prospect Now versus something else, we really have to earn our stripes, right? Because they have their own P&L, and their P&L in some cases is their life, right? Okay, am I gonna, take my wife out to dinner, or am I gonna buy Prospect Now? So one of the benefits of that is that you get good at what you do because you really have to earn your stripes. So we really focus on the quality of our algorithm. And in parallel, we believe in showing the agent the opportunity to exit. It's almost like if I say, hey, the exit's over there, meaning you can cancel if you want, right? Kind of lowers everybody's blood pressure. Then they can get in and try something and see if it works, right? As opposed to, I just don't think the real estate industry really buys this way, but this idea of saying, okay, you gotta like commit to this, and if you do, and then they blame the customer when it doesn't succeed, right? I mean, how many times have we seen that? Oh, you're just not tech savvy or what have you. So in summary, what we're doing is we're looking at all the transactions, right? We got about 140 million properties that we're tracking nationally. And, our data scientist, our chief data scientist is a, properly trained PhD, applied mathematics, just a super smart guy that basically married my desire to help the real estate agent get listings and his knowledge of how to architect the model, right? And in summary, what we do is we look at everything that's sold, and then we look at everything that has yet to sell and profile those that look the most like the ones that sold, right? So what we found is that if you market to the properties we identify and tell you to market to, they're about twice as likely to sell than the, kind of average or random property, right, in your farm. So if you spend $5-10 grand on marketing a month, right, and then you spend $99 with us to make that $5,000 or $10,000 go even farther to the ones that are higher, you're going to have roughly twice as good of results. So that's what we're doing. And we do it in all markets, most markets. There's a few markets where, the data, there's not enough transaction data to build like a statistically relevant model. But that still, we'll give you the data, and then we give you the tools we give you all the contact info of the owners. We have all the expireds. We've got, emails, phone number, all that stuff. But the seminal piece is, okay, call Jeff and not Bob, right? That's the point. So does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, it does. And I've got a couple of questions in regards to that. So how does that work? I mean, so how do you, so you're taking the data, which makes sense. You're saying, right, okay, this, let's talk about a neighborhood, and
right,
and these 5 homes sold, and there's another 250 in there. These properties have a higher likelihood of selling because
right,
they're similar to the 5. What does that look like? What does that mean?
Right.
What similarities are we talking about?
Well, that's the super interesting part of it, is that if you're building like a machine learning model properly, you've got to know your data to a certain extent, but also the model will also tell you what is most predictive, right? So to answer your question, we're looking at the whole property, right? The debt structure, how long they've owned it for, who owns it, like everything you can think of in terms of, how that is the data that's available on the property. And then we kind of narrow it down. We get rid of the data sets that we think are not remotely predictive. Like, I don't know, roof type or something. Does that really have an effect? Probably not. But if somebody just refinanced on a 30-year fix, like 45 days ago, are they going to sell? Logic tells me no, right? So we feed all that stuff into the model, and that's how it works. So then every week, it's really interesting to see it adapt, right? As markets change, as interest rates change, and what have you, it adapts, and we can see over time it's improved. Now, having said that, So you're going to see about an improvement roughly of about 2x, right? So let's say your turnover in your farm, I'll just make the number simple. Let's say you have 1,000 properties and 10% of them sold in the last year, right? So we might say, okay, market to these, 300, right? But 20% of those are going to sell. Does that make sense? So it's double, but we're reducing the footprint, right? But still 80% of them in that example are not selling, right? So you still got to do the marketing and you still got to get out there. But the data tells us, right, what to do. And then when you're looking on top of it, for those that do investment stuff, non-owner occupied like rentals and things of that nature, then you're even going back to my analogy of everybody trying to crowd in the same door. It's nice to be able to find the property owners that are harder to find. So the prospect now says this is more likely to sell. Oh, they own it in an LLC. It's pretty likely your competitor is having a hard time getting to that owner, right? So that's the other piece of it as well, is to try and get those hard to find owners, are the ones that are predicted to sell and are hard to find, right? So
sure. So what do you say to the agent who says, okay, I get it, it makes sense, there's data, and the data is gonna give me a greater likelihood of somebody willing to sell. Right. However, what it's never gonna be able to tell me is, if I stop, you said call Jeff, don't call Bob, or whoever. Right. You said, but what happens if Bob gets transferred for his job, that's the kind of data that you don't have, or gets a divorce, or has a relationship status change that now causes him to want to buy. I don't want to stop marketing to them, because what if that happens? So what do you say to somebody who says that says, I'm afraid of dialing in too tight because of the other variables?
And I think that's valid. I think there's always going to be a long tail, right? So what we found is that let's say you've got a third of the properties, going back to my analogy, a third of the properties are likely sellers identified by Prospect Now, right? What we found is that 80% of the sales, so let's say in that example, there's 10 sales, right? 8 of them are going to take place in that third. So you are going to lose the 2, right? So I guess I would just ask the question, if you are going to lose the 2, but you've reduced your marketing cost by 2/3, do you really want to do that? And some people might still say yes, actually. And obviously everybody's got their own marketing approach, but I like to, there's a thing on our website. It's called, at the bottom of it in the footer, it's called the ROI calculator. And I love that, because you can go in and identify, say I work in, Alameda County in California, right? You can go there and input what your marketing spend is, how many deals you did last year, all of that, and then get a calculation of what that market is, actually how our model's performing in that market, right? And see, what the lift would be. But I think to go a little bit deeper on the question is, and I think we talked about this before, there's no easy answers to this stuff. And you still have to differentiate yourself. You have to have a good marketing message. You have to do all those things, and and you got to do the hard work. Although it is our mission, our North Star is to just generate listings for you automatically, right? That would be ideal, but we know that's a very true north, right?
Sure. Sure. And I'm looking at it right now. So, and I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves, but it's at prospectnow.com. It's a very simple website, and I'm going to let you regurgitate that multiple times. But I clicked on the ROI calculator, and literally it asked 5 questions. Pick a state, pick a country, what's your annual marketing spend? How many deals did you sell last year, and what's the average deal amount? So that's pretty cool. That's something that I think it's not labor intensive.
The thing is, it's a lot of fun to talk to real estate agents about this stuff, because what we show on there, right, after you click the calculate button, is we give them an estimate of how much more commission dollars they could have earned if they had the product a year ago, right? So again, we have to put the disclaimer in there, right? No past performance, no guarantee of future return, yada, yada. But, it's very interesting because it's just math, right? We're saying, okay, well, the properties that we're identifying, we identified a year ago, are say 70% more likely to sell. How does that affect the commissions? And the concept is, okay, well, would you give me $99 for $40,000 in additional commissions, right? And the answer is obviously yes, but there's a lot of variables there, right? And what I found is just like any tool, the best agents make the best use of the best tools, right? And so that I don't think that's ever going to go away. But I like showing that because I think people kind of, oh, okay, I get it, and if you look there too, you can see the percentage turnover, Jeff. And you can see that it's about double, right? It's roughly about, like, if you look at, I think Alameda County, just, I've done this so many times, it's just kind of, hopefully we'll see how accurate my memory is, but it's in the 3% range, right, of the turnover, something like that. Are you looking at it right now?
I'm looking at my county that's in my market, but it actually is 3% as well.
Okay. So then, the properties that sell that we identified as likely sellers, probably around 5.5, right? Close to double, right? And so, now that still means that 95% of the properties did not sell, right? So, we got to look at that as well. It just means though that it's kind of like you're fishing and you shrunk the size of the pond by 2/3, but the same number of fish are in there, right? You're just reeling them in. So that's the idea, but it's got to be used in conjunction with all the other stuff. If you're a seasoned real estate agent, you know what I'm talking about, all the stuff you know how to do, right? And that's why we feel too, like, pretty strongly about getting people the opportunity to play around with it, right? Because that's what it's all about.
It's interesting too. So I did it and I could calculate, and it like immediately popped up all these statistics. And so then I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, maybe this is just pretty general, which, by the way, the prospect now is lower on my county, on this county I put in, which was 4.74 versus 3%, still much greater.
Okay.
Yeah. But the potential additional income is 250 grand rounding up.
Right.
And then the county statistics look very accurate. So it just, I was impressed by how fast it popped the data in. And then two, I went down to think, okay, so maybe this is just, general BS, and it's kind of my job to harass you here, right? But then I'm going down here and I'm seeing, okay, average value 162,716. That's about right for this county in Missouri. And so it's like, all right.
Well, what's interesting too is if you scroll down even farther, we'll show you the properties that what the seller score was prior to it having sold. So, you can go in there and look at it. And I just think it's really, we hear a lot about, machine learning and artificial intelligence and all that stuff. And this is a practical application. And by the way, we're just getting started on what this can do, right? Like we've got a refi model as well. And so, there's so much application for this kind of stuff. Obviously Zillow's using this kind of technology on their forecast. Like if you go to Zillow and they're forecasting like what your house is going to be worth, right? That's kind of interesting. So, we're obviously not the only ones doing it, but I think we're doing it with the passion around solving that one seminal problem that's kind of near and dear to my heart. And that's helping agents get listings.
I love it. This is really cool. So, all right. So obviously we've dove into this. Is there anything more that you think is extremely important to share about this platform of Prospect now as it relates to real estate agents? You mentioned even mortgage. This is going to apply to them as well, which it's predictive analysis. I mean, this is fat. It's almost like AI, and agents are hearing a lot about the AI in terms of communication. Like you have all of this AI, these bots that predicting how the conversation is going to go. Yeah. This is the same thing, just different, right?
Something fascinating is the other day I was talking to my wife, and we're kind of addicted to that show Shark Tank. And I know people have had this experience before, right? I was just like talking to her. I'm like, so what do you like? What percentage of these companies actually make it, right? You know, have you ever wondered that? Like, is this
Sure.
thing
Yeah.
great or what's the deal? So I'm sitting there and my phone's kind of right next to me, and I'm like, I wonder like which company is the most successful. So I went on my Google app and I'm like, most successful companies. I'm typing and it auto completes on Shark Tank. And I'm
You're
like,
right.
I'm like, oh my God, like this is, and that's, you know, a lot of people have said, okay, they're listening to your conversation. I don't think they're doing that, but I think they are so good at crosstalk around, you know, advertising and where I'm spending, what ads I'm clicking on and what shows I watch. And if you watch this show on Amazon, then, you know, all this stuff that they're auto, you know, predicting a lot of that. And that's the same tech, right? So it's, you know, just like anything, right? Humans are unbelievably amazing at creating technology for good and bad. Let's hope it all turns out well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so true, because I say this to my wife all the time. I'm like, you see, they are listening to you.
Yeah, right.
She,
I mean,
because she argues with me. She's like, no, they're not. And I'm like,
well, I will tell you this. Okay, so this I will confess this. I turned my Siri voice off, right? Because I just thought, now logically they have to be listening to hear for the Hey Siri, right? So I did that like 3 months ago, and then I just heard the other day like that apparently Apple contractors occasionally for correcting Siri and trying to make it better, which I understand. Some of that data is getting like they're listening, right? And trying to, okay, oh, it shouldn't have come on at that time or whatever, but that data is there, right? So I don't know, who knows? It's a black.
you know, to me, I think embracing it is much wiser than being upset about it, like a lot of people are.
You know what it is? Like, let's think of it from the other side, right? Let's say I'm a homeowner, right? And I get outreach from a real estate agent. Would I rather have that real estate agent using Prospect Now? The answer is yes, without question, because we're reducing the number of mailing pieces, right? We're only sending to the more probable candidates. So maybe I'm thinking about selling. Wouldn't I rather get that? That's where this is all going. I like, you know, we also have a digital marketing product on our platform where you can serve digital ads to the homeowners predicted to sell, right? And we use this technology called IP targeting, which actually pinpoints the exact physical location based on their IP address of a home. We know that guy's likely to sell. Okay, let's serve that person an ad. That's another capability in the system. And so again, you know, all we're trying to do is we're actually just trying to make the advertising more targeted. And I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. And I think most people that understand how this stuff works are fine with that. You know, it's just where the data gets misappropriated or misused, you know, risk of breach and all this kind of stuff, where I get that people have concerns. But all they want to do is sell me something. And guess what? They want to sell me something I actually want, instead of like, you know, lingerie or something. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I want my wife to shop for that.
Actually, you know, I just thought about it. Should I retract that? You know, did I just say that out loud just now?
It was an odd choice. I mean, there's millions of products you could have chosen, and you chose lingerie.
Yeah. We'll have to make sure that she's getting those ads.
So let me ask you this: when it comes to digital marketing, where are you marketing to them? On social media?
On the ad networks. So, you know, if you go to like any of the participating sites through most of the ad networks, you know, it's not dissimilar to when you go on, you know, you go on Amazon to look at a pair of shoes, and then you see the shoes all over the internet, right? It's the same concept, except that we don't require that homeowner had to visit a website. We've identified the location and mapped it to the IP address. So it's almost like digital direct mail is a good way to think of it, right? It's proactive, as opposed to, oh, you had to go to Amazon, you get the cookie installed, and then it follows you around the internet, right? So, you know, again, I think that tool though is a branding tool. So the way I recommend agents use that is, all of the above strategy. It's kind of like energy, right? Like, wind, fossil fuels, nuclear, like everything. Why should we cut anything out, right? Let's just all of the above, and it all works. They all have their positives and negatives, et cetera. But the point is that I think if you're serving digital ads to somebody online, and then you hit them with a postcard, and then maybe you knock on their door, like you develop some brand. Does it mean they're going to welcome you into their house with open arms? Probably not, but this is a long-term type of approach. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of how we recommend that be used.
I love it. And that is the game of the game. Everybody wants, they want it fast, and it doesn't exist. I mean, you might get it here and there, but it doesn't exist. It's a long game, and you need to establish yourself as the authority.
One of the things, the greatest things about real estate, going back to my earlier comment about the technical mindset, applying the technical mindset to sales, right? Is that there is a formula. Right? When I was doing commercial real estate, it was super easy. It was super easy to say, not necessarily super easy to do. They're different things, but 50 plus calls a day, 3 to 5 meetings per week, right? Going out and meeting, and then 1 to 2 listing presentations, 1 listing a month. I mean, that was what we lived by, and it worked. It wasn't like there was no, rocket science behind it. And what I found was that, even going back to my earlier point about personality types, it was the people that approached it systemically that succeeded. And so, like, a lot of people think, I've got to be this like charismatic, person to be successful in real estate, or, like real estate people are a certain, I don't think that. I think it's just blocking and tackling, right? And then eventually you get really good at what you're doing, and it goes from there.
I love it. Well, this has been great, man. This has been fun. This is we are not ones as LabCoat agents to come out and really promote necessarily a particular product because it's all coming from contribution. But I think this is a good example of something that is greater than that. It's not just about the product. It's about what went into it and what it does for them. Because I think this is a pulverizing conversation in the industry right now, which is, how do I not get my job taken? Right. And you are on the tech side, essentially could create something to take their job. But at the end of the day, you're just creating something. You're creating a bullet for their gun to make them better at their job.
Well, it's interesting because a few years ago, I'll tell you a story. This is on our YouTube channel. We have this one guy. His name's Ken Hoff, and he was a commercial real estate guy. Went and started his own business, bought a license of Prospect Now, and then just talk about working the system, right, and using the product. He ended up closing like a $275 million apartment portfolio deal with the tool. And so I interviewed him on our YouTube channel. You can go listen to it. It's super interesting. And he shares like everything from his call script. He's a super nice guy. But my point is that, obviously he did well on that deal, right? And so, I would be remiss if I didn't say, interesting, right? Like $99 a month, 7-figure commission check, right? Like, should we be thinking about, using our own stuff and so, that kind of a thing. And what I realized was, you gotta specialize, right? You have to focus on what it is that you're doing. And we're very comfortable, enabling the agent with more tools. And our business is built around that. If the agent's job goes away, the way Prospect Now is structured right now, Prospect Now goes away, right? So we are very invested in the success of the agent. And by the way, I think it's right and correct. I don't think the agent's going away. Otherwise I wouldn't be doing this. But anyway, so that's kind of, my philosophy on that. See where it goes, right?
I love it. I love it. So we're obviously like many weeks. Our time is we're going long. So let's wrap this up. And I want you to give the listener the best ways that they can find you. We already talked about the website, but let's repeat it. Is there a way that they can contact you, or do you have someone that they can contact if they want to learn more about this platform?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's prospectnow.com. And on that website, there's a bunch of different ways to contact us. We've got a dedicated customer support team, so you can call. That number is 888-956-9998. It's on the website as well. But live chat, you can just reach out to us. Our goal, like I said, is to help you be more successful. So yeah, I mean, Jeff, and by the way, I really appreciate you taking the time. And I mentioned this to you before we started, but I just want to reiterate it, is that, having done this for a while, I know that every real estate agent is their own business and they think that way. And what that means is there's a million entities out there, right? And I just find a lot of value in what you guys are doing to help, coalesce the industry around content and information and all that kind of stuff, because when everybody's out there doing their own thing, and it really serves a great purpose to let, people kind of be connected in that way in the industry. And so it's certainly like, me talking to you right now, it certainly makes my job easier, but I also think it makes the real estate agent's job easier. So, congrats on the success at LabCoat Agents.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And you're 100% right. It's exactly what it's designed for. And when something works, when we find something that's worth sharing, we put it out there. And, obviously we have a little bit more leverage and a little bit larger reach. And so that is the goal. The goal is to get the word out so more real estate agents have access to what they need, which they're not probably getting from their broker. And that's what this is. This is to give you the latest and the greatest. And I think Prospect Now is the latest and the greatest. And I'm interested to actually learn more. So I'm looking forward to talking to you off the podcast.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Good stuff, man. Well, I appreciate you being on. Is there any other way that, that anybody can follow you if they want to? Are you on Facebook? Or
I'm on Twitter. Right? You can follow me at Steve Wayne on Twitter. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Love connecting.
Awesome.
With folks.
Awesome. So again, it's prospectnow.com. It's a very easy. I've been sitting here playing around on the website as we've been talking. Very easy to use. They got that ROI calculator. That's pretty cool. Go check it out. This is fun stuff. And as always, if you like what you hear on our podcast, please, the thing you can do for us is share. Just as we're doing with you, please do the same for us. Share. Let people know about LabCoat Agents. Let people know about the podcast. Subscribe. Download, obviously, whatever podcast platform medium you use. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and let other people know about it. So again, Steve, this has been fantastic. I've enjoyed our conversation today, and look forward to talking to you more. And I think you're also going to be on LabCoat Agents on a live webinar as well. That's correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
It'd be great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, we're looking forward to continued dialogue with you. And this has been fun. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Appreciate it.